mean, we definitely saw importance of depth with the inevitable end of Paragon due to the lack of ranked, and with every update, it seemed just trying to oversimplify the game rather than give the player any reward for really delving too deep into it and just making it a little more complex.
Uh, Katros. Okay, it's Sock. This would be a question for you. So they don't have some kind of emulator, so that there's some kind of online play for Melee at all.
Well, they do have online play now, but that, I mean, that didn't come till much later.
Oh, okay.
So,
Guys, and that's
um,
crazy. Think about it. Like 19 years ago, that game was created, and simply because of some unintentional mechanics which are in the game, which are extremely frame perfect to learn, some of them. So it's very challenging to learn. Because of that, the game is surviving, and it's actually only getting bigger. So that is like the best example of what is of depth in a game. So I always come from Call of Duty, guys, and I'm always going to bring it up. You know why there's a new Call of Duty every year? Because the game has
what?
no depth. That's why. So they make a new game to change it up. That is what they call depth in Call of Duty. Now you could argue you could probably get a 2 or 3 years out of a COD to be in real reality, but as long as they're making big bucks, they're going to keep putting it out every year. But that's the point of it, and it's actually crazy about. I really enjoyed the part where you said it was unintentional, because there's that League of Legends documentary on Netflix at the moment, and it's actually the same thing. Like when League of Legends, which is a MOBA, they created this because there was essentially some ARAM game mode in Dota 1 that was the 3-lane idea that League of Legends and Dota 2 is. And it was just considered like a party game, like a casual game, but League of Legends decided, because so many people liked it, they decided to make that their game. And the idea of like freezing lanes, pushing your lane, crashing your lane, slow pushing it, like that was not meant to be a part of League of Legends, but it is, and that was there right from the beginning. In fact, the game was meant to be extremely simple and easy to play for newcomers, but it actually ended up being a complete 180 for League of Legends. And that game was in development for 3 years before it became full release for the public. So that's and that game's going 11 years now. And 14 years in total if you consider its development process. And that to me just shows why depth is important. Now, maybe year 1 you don't want to have as much depth as year 10, you know what I mean? But to put it in there so that people have something to learn, so the game doesn't get stale, that there's always something to improve, I think that's what it is. Because if there isn't something to improve on, it's going to be it's going to be more so about if you're hot or if you're cold, and that's going to decide if you have a good game or not, if that makes any sense.
Well, I mean,
right.
even
Yeah.
look at CSGO, for example. Like, think about how difficult it would be for somebody brand new right now to get into competitive CSGO.
Yeah, they would get pooped on.
And again, it's not an overly complex game, but it's the fact that you're able to find these perfect examples of just like player skill that really pushes the competitive scene of it. Like it's literally, it's not leveling up a character in game, it's almost leveling up yourself and just being a better player than the opposite team.
Well, I have an interesting analogy. That my so this is just an irrelevant plug, but I play like pretty high level competitive Overwatch, and I have like a coach for where I play at, and he said the main differences between a game in real life, such as like basketball, and a game like Overwatch or Fault or a video game, is that what the rules are in basketball, it tells you what you can't do. So you can do whatever you want on the basketball court, right? As long as you don't break these X amount of rules, okay? Now, in a video game, it's the complete opposite. You can only do what these rules, and rules meaning like constraints of the game, allow you to do. So in the sense that they're completely opposite, they're exactly the same, right? It's about doing as much as you physically can within the constraints you're given. And uh, the beauty about a MOBA is that uh, it's not like you just ship the game. So, like 10 years ago, whenever Call of Duty came out, you use Call of Duty a lot. Like, let's say Modern Warfare came out. Realistically, how much was that game changing in the next like 2 years after its release? Right, like not much. They may add like the first map pack ever or whatever, but whoop de doo, right? So you can add characters, you can add game modes, you can change the map, you can constantly buff and nerf characters, you can add new items, and like that's the beauty of like a MOBA is that like the platform of how the game can evolve is just to take so many different turns and twists. So having a game be in depth doesn't just mean be complicated. Usually they're like hand in hand because obviously the more complicated something is, the harder it is to do, and the harder something is to do, people are gonna get better at it, and people are gonna want to get good at it, and the people that invest their time to get better at something, like let's take something very fundamentally simple, like a CSing, like a farming in Fault, right? Like there's gonna be an inherent difference between how I farm and someone that has never played the game farms, right? So I've taken hundreds of hours to like essentially practice farming just by doing it, and I still can get way better at farming. Like I miss CS all the time. It just happens, and you could scale that up infinitely, like till you are hitting every single minion like physically possible. You can get better at it, and that's just like a very simple like explanation or example. But like jungle pathing and how you when you gank, when you invade, what items to buy, like it's just so much you could possibly think about. And the beauty of having characters is that you play Call of Duty, everyone's the same character, like with different the guns are different, right? But they all kill people relatively the same speed.
I'm going to tell
right?
you, like, in this new COD in particular, why it's actually considered the worst competitive COD probably of all time. Because, number one, the map doesn't make sense, so there's actually no, like, skill when it comes to spawn trapping anymore because of the spawns. So that got eliminated in this year. And, because of they decided that they were going to change the way they make maps this year. So there's like a big thing about 3-lane maps. Sometimes you'll see 4-lane maps, but they just changed that this year. So instead of having lanes, they'll have buildings. But you went from having three ways that you had to watch to watching 14 ways, which is just physically impossible. So then now it's a bit more about luck than anything. And the new Call of Duty also has an issue where it's supposed to run at 60 frames. But because of the Activision servers, it actually runs at 12 frames on console. And because of that, you can knee slide around a corner. And because you're playing at 12 frames, you literally will be able to see the person before they can see you. And you'll get like the first 3 bullets before they even see you. And that's like, so the new COD, more so than anything, is just about knee sliding around the corner. Knowing how to slide cancel is what it's
You're talking about like tick rate? No.
Yeah, so
frame
like,
rate? Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
So 12 frames would be like unbearable.
No, that's what it's running at.
Like,
yeah, it's
okay.
absurd. It's absurd.
Well, but yeah, I mean, I've played Modern Warfare, but I was just using Call of Duty as like a reference because you like have talked about it a lot.
Yeah.
But what I was saying is like, when I use Call of Duty as an example, is like every gun essentially does the same thing. It kills people, right?
Yeah.
The thing about like MOBAs is that different characters do distinctly different things and like have distinctly different ways they like interact with the game. So like if I'm jungling and I'm playing Steel and I'm going against Chimera, like there's distinct things I know I can do to like counterplay that Chimera. Yeah. But if I'm playing Countess and jungle and I'm going up against a Drux, like that's a completely different way of playing the game, and like that game is gonna play out entirely differently than the game I would be playing on Steel, right? So like you can just infinitely learn. Like you can learn knowledge of about the game, or you can learn like what characters do, how to do what. Like you can put yourself in other people's shoes the more you play the game. Like I don't play jungle really. Like I play a decent amount of jungle games, but like I'm a carry player. But like I've played the game enough to like kind of be able to guess where junglers are on the map and like when people are rotating, like relatively, like how long it's gonna take and things like that. And that's just like fundamental things that we built on. But yeah, that's my TED talk.
And I just want to bring up Unorthodox's point there. He just said like in Dota, they just recently introduced jungle items apparently, and because of that, it's like a completely different game this year. This season.
Yeah, that's one thing that's always nice about MOBAs too. It's constantly evolving. So,
Yeah.
even if you play like a meta that you don't necessarily enjoy or whatever, then or something is broken that uh, that isn't being addressed and it's kind of off-putting, then that's one of those things where uh, you can come back later on and it will be hopefully fixed by then, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or changed.
My
So
yeah, and one thing before we get in kind of to like into deeper points, one thing I would really love to see more so in Fault, and I'm almost certain it's gonna happen. You just got to give it some time. Okay. I would love to see where each role has more depth, so that like I love the idea that each role has like their own individual goals they need to achieve, so that they are viable come mid game or viable come late game or whatever it may be. Like macro play essentially. And that's where I'm really excited, because I remember when because we do every once in a while, we've been doing a lot more recently. We all join like the alpha chat in Strange Matter, and we all talk about different stuff. And there's one day that we talked about jungle pathing. Sockap and Dusty in particular talked about it a lot, and we were just saying about how that, because we're talking about the idea of static camps, which means that every camp is different and it'll hit you at different. Certain camps will do more damage to you, take more hits to kill, so on and so forth, and give you different buffs.
That's not static. That's
not
dynamic.
static.
Static. We have static camps right now in Fault. They all do the same thing.
Oh, okay. Dynamic camps. My apologies.
are you good?
That's all right. And just like how that in itself will change the way certain junglers, depending on which hero you're playing, what path they want to take, so that they're maximizing their farm as well as getting there in time for that gank, and so on and so forth. And then it also becomes mind games with the other jungler, even though you might not see him for the first 10 minutes of the game, which is really, I just think that's really cool. And I'd love to see that kind of depth right there, because that in itself means that there's like a huge skill ceiling to each hero in the jungle, and to just the jungler role in general. I would love to see that kind of depth in each role, because I play a lot of support, for example. I've been trying out mid lane a lot more recently, but I'm a main support usually, and yeah, I would love to see stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that would be good. So, sorry. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
That's all right. So, Reaver, what do you think about how would you add depth to the item shop, for example?
Well, right now more items like the current items that are in the game are just kind of like the bare necessities of what you need. Like you need to have at least one option for every stat, and like there is some like more niche items that are, I guess, like cool, I guess, and more unique uses. But there needs to be more like items that counter certain things. And when I say counter, I don't mean like I don't want it to be like rock paper scissors. Like I buy this item and I win this interaction because I buy this item. But just like if I'm playing carry and I want a little bit of armor, like I should be able to have a item that gives me like damage or attack speed and a little bit of energy armor or a little
Yeah.
bit of physical armor. So stuff like that will come. They did a lot of the actives first that they want, I think, because it's pretty easy to implement passives, from what I've heard, like passive items. Uh, but that, and I'd also want more the affinities, I guess. So like the affinities are the things you pick before the game starts. Um, and I know that's like a very, very simple system to have right now, and like the end game plan for that is to have it be a pretty good, intricate system of how to like
So
really like customize your experience.
yeah, so for everyone watching that only ever played Paragon, for example, you know how in Paragon, before version 42, we were working with the cards. So you'd build your decks. But because we were building decks and there was just a certain limited amount of cards for each color, what ended up happening is there was an optimal build that you would build every game with maybe a few optional items thrown in. And then after version 42, they actually simplified it to where you only had 3 cards, and it just got more simple. So there was an optimal build, and there's always going to be a meta build or optimal build. Like, don't get me wrong, that's going to happen. But the point with this item shop and why Paragon was the only person to use a card system like that, to where every other mobile uses an item shop, is because there needs to be a counter to an optimal build, and there needs to be more than one optimal build, depending on which heroes you're playing. I'm about to sneeze. Give me 1 second. Okay, where was I? So there needs to be more than one optimal build, and there needs to be room for an off build, but can still work. So that's why Fault has moved its way into an item system, because now there's going to be room for counterplay, and it's not just going to be everyone running the same deck. You know what I mean? For every hero, or for ADCs or whatever it may be. There's always slight difference, but in the bare bones of it, and
And that already exists like a lot actually. You change your build a lot based on like enemy team comp and who's like strong.
yeah, exactly, and that's where Fault is doing. They're doing something different. Thank you for the follow, the Doctor XX. I'm glad you're enjoying the stream. So that's where Fault is doing something different than Paragon. So yes, I agree. The deck system was fun. I hated grinding for the early game attack damage cards, but that's beside the point. But now with Fault, they're moving away from that, so that you now can be more creative with your build, and that there's going to be a skill to building your items. Because every game, depending on which hero you're playing, or where you are in the game, or how the enemy team's doing, you're doing, the cards you choose might change, and that's one thing that Fault is doing differently. And it's going to bring in more depth.
Yeah, for sure. Whatever heroes you're going against, you're gonna have to actively like check their builds and stuff during the game. Those types of things it's going to be pretty paramount. Somebody stacking armor, obviously you're going to want to build pen, because I'm going to tell you from the first-hand experience, it feels pretty bad playing against somebody who's got a bunch of HP and armor and not having any pen items as an ADC. And Fault, for a while when we didn't have any pen items, it was rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but like, just to like show an example of like how they're wanting to add items, like the first like big items that they added were the pen items, and they did 2 different pen items that both are like circumstantially different. So like the one pen item is more flat pen, so it's for like squishier targets with less armor.
Yeah.
And then there's another item that has a percent pen that increases. So like that percent pen that increases is for like tank busting kind of. So like it's up to you if you're building pen. Like, hey, which one do I need? Do I need to be focusing the squishies more and just like trying to like 3 or 4 shot them, or do I need to like try melting these tanks while my mage takes care of like the ADCs and just simple things like that, like that you have to like essentially make a decision on. It's unoptimal just to like mindlessly build the same thing every game in Vault.
Yeah, and I'm just really happy about that, because that's just gonna add more skill. It's gonna make it. It does make it more complicated, but it shouldn't be that bad, especially if they have an internal matchmaking system, which I do believe they do, even for public. You shouldn't ever feel like you're getting pooped on because someone is just using better items than you. If that or they're doing a better job with their items.
If anything, it'll be because they have like more items or they're just better. Like
Yeah.
it's not going to be. It won't be like, wow, I physically can't win because this guy built this item. It's more like, okay, this guy has 300 more, like 300's bad. This guy has 50 more CS than me and 2 more kills, like, and has died twice less than me. He's gonna probably like roll me over, like.
Yeah. And the next thing I wanted to talk about in with depth is this is I put down AP/AD. So that's not what it would be called in Fault, but that's what it would be called in League of Legends. So AP meaning attack power, so basic attack damage. And then AD is attack damage, AP is ability power. So in Fault it would be your magic damage and your physical damage.
Well, it's power and ability power, is what they're titled. But unlike Paragon, like you gotta kind of get away from the thought that it's like auto attack damage and like ability damage. So like Muriel, for example, like has ability damage, auto attacks, and like some characters have abilities that do physical and energy damage. So you have to think of like physical and energy rather than
Yeah. Why I put this down as a point is because I remember being in the Strange Rider Discord, and this was like the second day the website came out. There was someone in the Discord that was saying, why is it that his basic attack and all of his abilities do physical damage besides his ult? Why does his ult do energy damage? And they said, that just doesn't make sense. And like at face value, it doesn't make sense. And that's a good argument. But I came in the chat, gave him my 2 cents, and then Sockcap came in right after that and gave his 2 cents. I don't know if you remember this Sockcap or not.
Yeah, I kind of remember him, that guy talking on Discord.
So I'm of the belief that if someone has a concern, then there's multiple people that have a concerns. You know what I mean? For every one person that thinks this way, there's probably another 10 that just aren't saying it verbally or writing it down that are thinking that way. And so my 2 cents about it is, for someone like Greystone, for example, they could have made it so that all his abilities did physical damage. But that would make it more simple. And what I mean by that is, when it comes to your item building now, you're only going to choose item cards. But because there is like an imbalance directly in his kit, and it's not saying that he's going to be worse, and that's what because he has energy damage as one of his abilities, it doesn't synergize with the rest of his kit the way you would think it would. It doesn't mean he's going to be worse. It just means that you're going to have to be more meticulous with the items you build and when you're going to dive that tower, because it is his ult, to get that respawn, for example. And that's what I think, and that's where, when it comes to attack damage or physical and energy, that's where I really like the idea that Fault's going with, is there's going to be a bit of depth when it comes to that, because it comes into everything. You need to know your item building, you need to know when to use your abilities, and so on and so forth. and you can't just, well, you can, I suppose, but it's probably not going to be a good idea to just have 5 items of just physical damage. Maybe you want one item to be physical and do a little bit of energy penetration or whatever it may be. So what is your guys' thought on that?
Go ahead, Reaver. I'm not too big on the technical stuff, so I'm not a good person to ask for that.
Yeah. I can pull up. Hang on. If I can find it. If I can find it. Actually, this is a long time ago, and this chat kind of gets crazy.
Did we lose Reaver?
Did we lose Reverb?
Is he gone?
He's going to get some water.
He's going to get some water.
Yes.
Right here, Doug. What's up?
Can you hear what we were saying?
I was grabbing some water.
So we're talking about. So the example we were giving is how in Greystone's kit at the moment, all his abilities, besides his ult, does physical damage, and how it just makes it. You have to be a bit more. You just have to be a bit smarter with the items you decide to build and how you're going to level up your item and the pathing you choose to level up your abilities and so on and so forth.
Did you guys read Greystone's new ult?
I did, yeah. You get to choose where it's going to happen.
So personally, I'm a fan of it being a ability power because energy damage. Because I'm not trying to get hit by a tactical nuke every time he ults. So
I just heard some weird noise.
Sorry, I thought that I hosted you, but I didn't realize that you can't host. I thought I went offline, and I did not. So now I am hosting you. I apologize.
That's all right. Thank you for the raid there.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So why I wanted to bring it up is because there's people out there, and you guys, and if you're one of those people watching the stream right now, it is understandable to think this way. I'm not trying to shit on your opinion or anything, but I just wanted to try to give my 2 cents and to higher level players that have a bit more knowledge about MOBAs and Fault than I do, and see what their opinion is too. So what someone was concerned about is because it's energy damage, it just doesn't synchronize in his kit, and it's going to make his item building weird. So it's just going to make him inherently worse. When in all reality, that's not the case at all.
yeah, like when have you ever played Greystone and been like, damn, I wish my ult hit harder? Like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
it's not really his point or his role, you know.
Yeah.
So, so wait, it's physical damage that gets converted into energy or magic damage, correct? Isn't that how his ult works right now?
Actually, we'll just pull it up. We'll pull it up, and I'll see.
this website's so nice, by the way.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it scales off your energy power, but like it has really high scaling. So like it I think it wouldn't be that like unviable of a like path to go for like kamikaze Greystone, where you're just like let's say you had 300 AP, like at max level, that's like 800 or 900 damage.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, you could. I mean, you could do that. That's the nice thing about like, for one thing, it offers like a little bit of diverse like damage types. I don't know if that's necessarily like what they are intending for Greystone in particular, but like anybody that has like mixed damage is always like kind of harder to itemize against. But if you have like AP scalings and like AD scalings on moves that are different, right? It kind of opens up the door to have like some interesting builds or maybe some fun and unique builds. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, you see it all the time in League where somebody takes a
Well,
typically like AD champ and builds them like full AP, and then they have like one ability that
yeah.
just like absolutely smacks, and the other ones just don't do
Yeah.
anything. You know what I mean?
So, Ketros, as your just question there. So different builds. If your ult is a safety in case you need it, or you're going to be more aggressive and plan on popping it and doing damage with it. I like it. Yeah. So that's it. Essentially, what it's trying to say is it even adds depth to the character. Right at what you're gonna do. So one thing I've learned, I've only played a little bit of League of Legends, guys. Like I'm a total noob at it. I don't even think I have 4 hours of gameplay on the game yet. And one thing I learned, especially from watching Reverb and Sock streams, is that in League, you sometimes it might be a better decision to build a character that the meta might be to build him physical damage with your items. But this game, you're going to do energy damage because of who your off lane is. And Sockcap is notorious for doing an off.
AP sign, baby.
Yeah.
No, I do AD sign. I don't build them tank. I build them like
Yeah.
an assassin.
So that
good
same
top.
idea is now
Then I
being
feed.
brought into Fault. So for all the new viewers that just joined in, this is the Faultarian Journal, number 8. This is our 8 weeks in a row. We're in Act 2. And we got 2 special guests. We got the poster boy of Fault, Reverb, and we got the man, the myth, the legend himself, Sockcap.
Hey, thank you.
And they're here to share with us their thoughts and opinions about certain topics and certain discussions. So yeah, so that is more so the idea. So it is coming. And as you can see on the screen, and this is the example we're working with right now, is if you read these abilities, all of these do physical damage, with the exception of his ult, does ability damage, and how that, even though it doesn't at first look like it synchronizes, it actually adds depth to the character because he's going to be just as good as even if he did physical damage. It's just going to be a bit more skillful, and when you decide to pop it and so on and so forth. And it can also be more skillful because let's say someone's building a lot of physical armor, you know what I mean, because you're going mano a mano against the offlaner. Well, now you have an ability that they might not have as much energy armor, so now you have one ability that might be really beneficial to use against that specific character, and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
And
I'd recommend looking at the website for stuff like this because it has like the actual percentage scalings and like damage values, so you can actually see like the hard numbers of what's. It's just playfault.com.
Yeah, I'll find it. Give me 5 seconds.
But because like a really good reference for like we were talking about depth earlier and like different damage types. Like it's not different damage types. So if you're like Kwong's kit, he's got a new E, and you could play Kwong in like very different ways based on like how his kit kind of works now, which is interesting.
Okay, so what would be an example there? I'm pulling up Kwong.
So his E used to be what his passive is now. So every character got a passive added.
Yeah.
So Kwong's E, if you read it, so it has 2 different forms, but essentially it's armor shred. So you can like build him full like ability damage essentially, and like armor shred people and like chunk, right? But then you're sacrificing that like tanky engage, but also his right click scales the shield scale on his right click that you get. So like so the more health you have, I think it's health, the more the shield scales, but it could be wrong.
Yeah. Well, so what ability are you talking about? Is RMB?
His E and his RMB. So his E like specifically scales for shredding energy armor.
Yeah, plus 70% energy armor as energy damage. If his sword is on the battlefield, yeah. Power of the Heavens shreds energy armor on targets hit. And there's RMB, which is his same RMB that it was before.
Well, half of it's the same.
Okay.
If he's
Energy,
holding,
energy power again.
Yeah, if he's holding his sword, he gets the shield. If he's got the sword out when he RMBs, then it's the standard what it was before.
Yeah,
But
he
like
gets
a
the.
new,
I see what you're saying.
yeah,
Yeah.
but like so you could like build him completely like two fundamentally different ways. Like you could go like that full tank bruiser kind of build and still have like the utility of his kit with like the tether and the slows and stuff. Or you could go for like that assassin like burst engage. Because if you think about it, if you tether someone, his new E works kind of like it's like a lightning strike comes from his sword to his hands. So like if you tether someone, you can E them, like right click them and alt them. And if you're building like full ability power, it does a lot of damage. Like it chunks. So it's just things like that they're adding to the game that I'm really excited for because they're keeping the identity of the characters, but like just making the kits have a little higher skill ceiling and be more interactive.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to talk about like some of the other changes that have been made to certain character? I can't. I don't know what's been
If it's on
talked
the
It's
about.
all,
website, you can
it's
talk about
it's
it.
all on the website. Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, so like Sparrows is a good example, right? A lot of the characters that had like passives built into their kits already. Well, a lot of characters that had passives as an ability that you had to level up, those are now their actual passives, right? So and also like adding a passive to a character just makes it like more complex,
Yeah.
just naturally, which is great. So, Sparrow's passive is now her stacking damage, right? Every time she hits a consecutive auto
Yeah.
on a target, she gets increased damage, right? So instead, what the ability that they added to replace her passive ability, it's now just her passive, is the hunter's mark or whatever. So she marks a target and well, I think it is based off of her next auto. So
yeah. It
she
empowers
uses it.
her
Yeah,
basic.
yeah, empowers her next auto, and then when she hits that target, they get marked. When they're marked, then she stacks, I think, twice as fast against that character. Um, I think is the rate that she stacks
Yeah,
at.
and it gives you
Uh,
like a baseline extra, like just flat stacks.
Right. So you get the extra stacks initially, plus you're gonna hit full stacks relatively quickly, especially if you build like attack speed. I imagine that she's probably gonna shred
Guys, I'm just
pretty
saying, Sparrow's
pretty
kit
hard.
looks nuts. Like, she looks like
Yeah.
she's gonna
Yeah,
hit you like a Mack
But
truck.
the other
the thing
thing that
is,
they added to her though is that her piercing shot, if you hit somebody that's marked with that hunter's mark, then that's now a slow. So if you hit somebody with a piercing mark, you can slow them. So you have a little bit more utility in that kit, but then it's also just based off of your skill. Because obviously, if you whiff the hunter's mark or the piercing shot, then you're not going to have any form of self heal at all.
it's at
Not that.
the bottom of the E stranger.
Mhm. So all
Yeah.
that stuff's like pretty neat, and I mean, constantly are talking to us about hero kits, what we would like to see changed on certain hero kits. Like Reverb said, they're going to keep the kind of identity of each champ, but they're going to change the kits up to make them, at least some of them, slightly more complex, uh, slightly more geared toward like a specific um, type of thing that this character is good at doing, and not so like wildly fucking busted, right? Like some characters, like I'm gonna say, this is just me talking right now. This isn't anything definitive, but I'm gonna say that, like, for example, Wraith Rewind, that thing's probably gonna get reworked in some way, shape, or form because that move was insanely strong in Paragon,
Yeah.
incredibly busted, right?
Castros, I would recommend League of Legends. It definitely has completely different mechanics than Fault does, but the actual MOBA tactics and the macro knowledge and stuff that's gonna be the best to play.
A
Or
lot
you
of the
could go to
mechanics I think in League are probably going to be similar to. It's a little bit different because it's a
It's like the
isometric top
input
down.
method is different, but
Right,
like the fundamentals are all right there.
right.
yeah.
Um, so, but yeah, for sure, macro wise, knowing where to be on the map at a certain time. knowing how to econ well and make sure that you're always trading well. If you're getting poked in lane, you're always like farming, and once again uh, keeping track of timers and trying to take like favorable trades, whether it's damage wise or gold wise, whenever you can. Then that's kind of league kind of puts you into that
Yeah.
mentality, because
One
you can
thing,
definitely, you don't have to run around and kill each other all the time.
yeah,
You can definitely just out macro a team and win.
yeah. One thing I'm hoping Fault will get there, and they're not there yet because of the Paragon assets weren't there at all. But you know how in League, because I have so many characters, you could say that there's like a kind of like a hyper tank, a hyper mid, a hyper jungle, a hyper carry kind of thing, so that every role has the ability to carry if they do well enough. If that makes any
Oh,
sense.
Fault's definitely like that.
It is like that.
Hmm.
100%.
Ah, that's something I'm really excited for. So that if you truly excel in your lane, to the point that your micros are changing, your micros are becoming your macros in a sense. And if, for people who don't know what we mean, so macro, when we talk about macro, that would be like game decisions that have a strong impact on the game. So a macro decision would be, okay, I'm going to rotate to go help out this team fight, and that rotating decision would have a huge change on that team fight because there's an extra person there. To where your micros would be something as you're making sure you're hitting every last hit on your minions in your lane so that you're not missing any farm.
Yeah, I think your micro is more like essentially focused on uh, your character, right? Like the mechanics of your character and all that stuff. And that's generally what everybody will learn in a MOBA like fairly well if they play enough, especially if they like a certain character and they kind of one trick that character. You'll learn how to micro well. Like you'll learn like how to space, how to well. I say that you will, but there's a lot of people in the Paragon community that never really learned that. But the thing that separates like good players from the best players is the macro, right? At a certain point, you get to a certain proficiency with your character where, and at least in gameplay wise, that like nobody's gonna be like missing any abilities. People are gonna be like using them at correct times. People are gonna all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to utilize their character to pretty much its fullest potential, and that's going to be everybody in the game. The thing that once again separates the good players from the bad players is going to be more of the macro, how they econ, the trades that they take, the decisions that they make, and um, all that stuff. So
Like, to kind of build on what he said, like, I'd say, like, any player can essentially hit, like, maybe the top, like, 5 or 10% of, like, a skill, like, threshold. So, like, essentially anyone can, like, get decent enough to where they can, like, mechanically be good if they want to, like, if they put in the work or have, like, kind of some talent or use their big brain. But like going from like that 90%, like if we're going from 0 to 100, right? Like 90 is where you want to be. Going from 90 to 100 mechanically is just as hard as it was going from 0 to 90. Like getting that little itty bitty edge is really important. It's like having like nearly perfect aim and like complete efficiency of your champion or your character is going to be important. But like just you can from behind, like you don't even have to be ahead. You can dictate a game into your favor, like by just knowing how to play the game, like fundamentally from a macro sense.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%. And probably the last point of Act 2 that I wanted to talk about is what how do I word this? What would be when it comes to depth, how would you say that there's a depth in rotating a character, if there is at all? Like true on just rotations.
I mean, it's essentially like an investment of your time, right?
Yeah.
Because uh, if you're like the mid laner and you see that there's like a scuffle going on in your duo lane, like you could pressure this tower, you could get this farm, you could roam around, like push something for the map, or you could take that like calculated decision to go and uh like help that fight, like rotate for that fight.
Yeah.
So it's very like circumstance. Like there's no one's gonna be able to like write a guide that's like if X happens, you do this every time. Like it comes down to game sense and like knowing fundamentally, like trusting your gut, but your gut can't like be lying to you. You know, like your gut's got to know what it's talking about.
Yeah.
So
So why I wanted to make this point is because in Paragon, it seemed for the most part that it was if there's a team fight, you rotate, you want to be there. But because the way Fault is set up and because farm is going to be so important, was and such like that. Yes, there may be moments, and it's all going to be circumstantial, of course. There may be moments where maybe you don't want to rotate to that team fight because you're about to take this tier 1 or tier 2 tower, for example. Um, so that's where Fault is doing something a lot more different than Paragon did, where there's going to actually be depth to the rotations because sometimes it might not be worth your time to rotate because you're about to miss a bunch of farm that is way more beneficial for your character, for example, depending on what role you're playing.
Sorry, I'm sorry. What was the question again?
I didn't really word it as a question.
It's
But,
no, it's not your fault. I'm just this room is like super hot, and I'm just sweating
PD
my ass
Kane,
off.
when it comes to Fault, Strange Matter has set a tentative date for June slash early July is what it's looking like right now. Is when the game's going to come up, but there's no exact hard concrete date at the moment because depending on how much they get done, it might come out a bit earlier, it might come out a bit later, so on and so forth.
I think, like Reverb said, I think it'll be sooner than later. So
Yeah,
we'll
I'm really
we'll see.
excited for that.
But things are
Yeah.
things are
So, well, what I
are
was
moving along.
for the rotating, what just to word into a question, I was thinking about it as because the importance that they're putting into farm and taking towers and all that stuff in full, it might not always be a good decision to be like, okay, there's a team fight, let's rotate. Because it might be more important to get that farm so you can get
well,
ahead
I
of
mean,
the carry or get that tower or whatever it may
it
be.
wasn't like that in Paragon. Like I mean, Paragon was like had less like MOBA elements than Fault does, yes, but like it still was a MOBA. Like
Yeah, it
it
was.
that just kind of depended on like your like skill level and like what like level you're playing the game at. But like it wasn't just like a team fight simulator. I mean, obviously like
I mean, it
lower
kind of
elos.
was.
I mean,
It kind of was, dude. At higher elos, it kind of was too.
but
Like,
less than like I think that you're making out to be though.
I don't know. I remember getting flamed at like level 2 when my mid laner rotated to um, off lane and killed the off laner after I pinged the guy like 5 times that he was rotating, and then I got flamed for not rotating. This is one of those things where like if your laner is rotating, like you should rotate. I'm sure, like that guy probably should have like listened to my pings because I was like spam pinging him, like, hey dude, he's coming the off lane, right?
Yeah.
And this is at high elo, right? This is on my main account, so this is at the MMR cap. I can't remember the guy's name, who it was. I want to. It was Soliv. It was Soliv is who it was. So that's the guy that died to that gank. So this is one of those things where it's like you kind of were expected to rotate with your laner like at any given point in time. As laning was kind of like somewhat optional. Of course, like farming was still like important and stuff, but rotation times were so low. And we've gone over this before in Paragon, at least in version 42. And the other versions it was less of a team fight simulator, but in 42 it was definitely a kind of like just fight all the time, team fight all the time. That's all you did. There wasn't any like
As long as you're winning your team fights, you're winning the game.
right. And there wasn't any like huge depth to it. But the way it worked with like the gyms and buying cards, right? Like you got if you the minions were executable, so farming became like incredibly easy. And then also, even if you missed those minions, you got 60% of the gold. So essentially, like uh, if you miss 3 minions, you're still basically getting 2 minions gold worth, right? If am I doing that right? Yeah, 180 percent, right? So you're almost getting 2 minions of gold. So and then having to spend like 1,000 gold to buy a stat point. Let's say you're going for a card that has that requires like 5 stat points in a certain uh, tree or whatever or stat. Like really, you know, if you're out farming that guy, you're not going to get that item too much quicker than they are, because they're essentially still getting 2/3 of the the gold. You know what I mean? So um, it's just kind of stupid the way it was set up. So, in regards to your question of like rotating a fault, you just kind of have to be careful about it. I would suggest like probably early on, in because it actually has like a laning phase, like a pretty um, might not be as long of a laning phase as League, but it definitely still has a pretty decent laning phase. So early on, you probably don't want to rotate too much, unless you are pretty confident that you'll be able to get something out of it. Um, but I think like a better way to impact the game early on is to just outplay your laners and get ahead in your lane. And then from there, try to out macro the teams, the team that you're playing against. Sorry, my son just yelled fire and ran outside, so I'm a little bit concerned. But yeah, it's a campfire. But I didn't. They came from the other edge of the house and yelled fire, so I was a little bit concerned there. But yeah, especially as like a support, right? Like if your carry's like doing well and they're ahead, like you probably want to stay with them and kind of like further that lead as best as possible. If your carry gets to the point where they're like you don't have to be with them anymore because they're just so far ahead that they're just, you know, I mean, half the time when I played with Reverb in early access, it's just like, okay, dude, like it's 8 minutes in, you've already got, like 6 kills, you've backed twice and bought, like you're probably okay, right? Like I can leave you for a little bit unattended. They're probably not going to try to mess with you or anything like that. So in those
They always do,
situations,
dude. They always try to mess with you, dude.
in those situations, you can kind of rotate, but I still wouldn't, rotate too far, I guess. So you
All
just,
right. All right. Uh, Reverb, Sockcap, Chandler, do you guys have anything else you'd like to add to that, or are we good?
I'm good with
So
that.
the only thing I can think of, and again, this is probably come from way left field because I'm definitely a little more casual player than everyone else, but I don't know. I've brought this up a couple times, and people have had pretty polarizing opinions on it. But just on the topic of rotating, so again, being somebody who would have very little experience when it comes to any major competitive aspect of the game, how important or how much do you guys think it may help a new player sort of understand the situational need for rotating if you added something like in-game voice chat for your team as compared to text and just pings? Because somebody, you may want them, your jungle, to rotate into your lane and whatnot, but it may just not be convenient for you to ping it or anything like that. So do you guys see any real benefit to voice chat in that aspect? Or
Um,
is it still one of those things that's just not that popular for people
I
to see
mean,
a need for a voice chat?
you can't really go wrong with like voice chat, but it's I feel mean, I don't know about the development of it, but I feel like it's not that necessary. There is a new ping system coming that will let you like contextually ping the map. So like,
Nice.
Yeah, it's like in League where you can like ping like uh different points on the map or whatever to
Yeah.
have somebody go there.
so you won't just have to be like, on my way right. I need help. Good job. Good job. Good job. Like you'll be
Yeah,
able to
after
like
you die.
you'll be able to like ping specifically on the map. You can be like danger here or like be careful or I need help like in a specific part about the
So
map.
something closer to like Apex Legends and their ping system.
Yeah, that'd be. I mean, it's gonna be very much like League's ping system. I know you said you haven't really dabbled much in other
Yeah.
Well, I was
MOBAs.
just thinking with Apex, just because again,
Yeah,
it's
it's
first
it's it's kind of
person,
like
so you have that
Apex.
aspect of looking around rather than just pointing at a location.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if they had like very much like Apex, like where you aim, you can ping. But the
Yeah,
thing is, like, you want to be able to ping across the map or like where you can't see is the thing as well. So like
yeah,
being able to hold like left alt or something and like pull your cursor up,
Yeah.
it'll be nice.
Yeah, and
yeah,
actually like ping on the map like, hey, like I need help, and then like ping that you're going into their jungle or something like that. But I do think that like it would be nice to have like voice comms and stuff, but I mean obviously everybody uses Discord, so it's not like that big of a detriment. But
yeah,
I guess I like have to be careful about like who you're listening to, right? Because if you have just like some idiot just shot calling and telling you like, hey, we need to invade this, and it's like, dude, I have like two waves stacked up on each other, like pushing into my tower. Like I need to get this farm, right? I'm not gonna go. Is this the thing? Like when we talk about farm being like pretty important, it's like 5 CS is essentially like a kill,
Kill.
right? So in gold terms, I mean, um kills are obviously like pretty important still because you kill somebody, they have the death timer, and then they have to run back to lane, so they're gonna miss like quite a bit of gold. So, but in terms of like the actual monetary value, like 5 CS is a kill and gold. So it's important to farm, and that's the thing. What I would recommend like new players do just in general is like when you first get into the game, like get a feel of the game, right? Like learn kind of the pacing and all that stuff. Try to focus on farming and just try to focus on like not dying in your lane and trying to like learn your character, right? I mean, obviously, most people probably coming into this are not going to be like fresh off the block, right? And they're not going to come into this without that prior knowledge of Paragon, at least initially.
yeah,
Hopefully that changes further on down the road. So you probably will have some kind of preconceived notion on how to play your character, but that once again, there's little nuances. Like, for example, I don't know if it was you, Reaver, but I think it was you that figured it out. But like, there's a lot of combos that you can do, like for instance with like Murdoch. He is different with his kit now in a certain sense. Like he gets that passive movement speed towards enemies that are low health, right? And he gets the little wee woo sirens going off and runs at them.
yeah,
But he's got his push and he's got his traps. His traps are slows, but if you push somebody with his push into a trap, it becomes a stun, right? So that's something that's different that wasn't in Paragon in any iteration of his kit. So that's kind of like an interesting element. So you can actually like chain CC people with Murdoch. If somebody like a Bellica lands a knockup, and Murdoch can quickly lay a trap behind her and then shove her into it as soon as she comes back down. So
okay,
that's why I
And
say
yeah,
like learning how to like utilize your character as best as possible, learning how to farm and being sure that you pay attention to last hitting and just getting like competent at that, and then from that point on like worrying about other higher concepts. One thing I think that's like pretty important to do is just to like maybe look up like kind of MOBA concepts in general, like from League, for example. When I say like, as a jungler, you have priority in your duo lane or your mid lane at a certain point in time. That means uh, basically that they either have more wave clear, or they're just hard pushing, and the other person isn't matching that hard push. So they're actively pushing your minions into the enemy tower. So in that sense, you know, you have priority in that lane. You might be able to go for like an invade or do, go for an objective like raptors or whatever, because they're going to be preoccupied with farming those creeps under tower, right? If they choose to rotate while their creeps are being pushed under their tower, well, then they're missing all that CS. So if they come to the fight and you guys win it, now they're kind of double fucked because they've missed out on that wave and they died, or whatever. But even if they come over there, maybe the fight doesn't go so well, maybe, a few people die on each team, they still kind of lose out because they're losing that farm that's been pushed under the tower, right? So the concepts like that, those are like more of a macro concept, right? And that's kind of like I would say like a pretty entry level concept in League of Legends to like learn that stuff, and learning like what champions kind of counter other champions too. So when you go into a game, if you're not like some sort of one trick like I am, you can go for counter picks, or you can at least know like, okay, well, this person in off lane, he's got a bad matchup, so like there's a possibility that he's gonna lose his lane or he's gonna be behind, so we're gonna have to contend with maybe a Severog, or I don't even know counters, to be honest, but well, maybe we're gonna have to contend with like a Fed Greystone, or a Greystone that's like further ahead of our off laner, is more tanky. So what do I need to like prioritize when I build? As the game goes on, as you see stuff like that happen, just being conscious of that type of stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
K-Trucks, the wee woo sirens, dude. The wee woo.
On Murdoch.
Man, I love those wee woo sirens,
Yeah.
dude.
Oh my goodness.
What's up, Mike?
Hey, Mike. Nice to see you join back.
Did you know that at your max level of your passive, so if you're running someone down like with any of your passive procs, it's based on if you're looking at them or not. But you can like strafe and look at someone that's low and move towards someone else that's not low and move faster.
That's kind of cool.
It's like
See?
you
That's
could
a little tip right there, dude.
you
I
could
didn't
like
even know
backpedal or like strafe left and right while looking at someone else, but go towards like whoever you're running down. But I'm not gonna like talk about this forever, but like essentially you don't want to have to think about playing your character. Like you want your character to be like an extension of like how you play the game. So like just getting comfortable, getting games underneath your belt, like
Yeah.
that's pretty much the best thing you do. Like worrying about rotations and stuff like that is not something I'd like. That'll just come with time. There's no like I said, there's no guide. You just kind of know, right? It's like anything else that just comes to you.
It comes with experience and time.
Yeah, for sure. But there's ways to kind of, like I said, like, obviously the first thing you want to try to focus on is like learning how to farm and learning your character, and then as those things become second nature, then you build upon those kind of aspects of the game, right? You might start going, okay, well, this game, I feel pretty confident in playing my character, and I feel pretty confident in farming. Now I'm going to pay attention to the timers, right? So I'm going to pay attention to when certain things spawn, when they were taken. And another thing that I know people in Paragon did not do, that is something that they could possibly do in this game. If there's any sort of abilities that are going to have like long cooldowns, right? Like right now, you don't have any sums or anything like that in Fault. You don't have any summoner spells, so you don't really need to keep track of anything like that, right? But there's not that many characters in the game right now, so being able to like keep track of like when somebody uses an ultimate, because there's no way in Paragon of like pulling up your screen and seeing like what person on your team has what ultimate. Like you can, if it's helpful information for you and your team, right? Let's say you pop Greystone's ult and that level 1 it's 2-minute cooldown or a 2.5-minute cooldown, and you type in Greystone ult at this timer, right? Because you have a timer at the top of your screen, and then he will have ult at this timer. It's something that you could probably do pretty quickly,
Yep.
that would help your team out. Okay, they know now. Okay, I can engage on this Greystone because he still won't have his ult for another minute. You know what I mean? So that type of stuff is important. If they add any sort of actives that have long cooldowns, if they add some sort of blink that has, you know, minutes of a cooldown, you know, maybe it's 3 minutes, maybe it's 5 minutes, and you see one of them use their blink, okay, Bellica used blink at this time, you know, and then if it's a standard thing across all items, then people will be able to look at that timer that you put into the chat and say, okay, well, in 3 minutes she's gonna have her blink again. So that type of stuff.
Thank you guys for this. So we're gonna call it the end of Act Two. At the end of Act Two, we always take a 10-minute break because I really need to go to the bathroom and I need to refill my cup of water because talking for this long it makes your mouth really dry. Believe it or not. And so we're just gonna take a 10-minute break there, guys, and we're gonna get some music going. And stay tuned because we will be back.